Good morning, guys. We're here in Kalgoorlie at Goldfields Off-Road. We just finished an upgrade, a major upgrade to Bear, which you may or may not have seen on YouTube at this stage, so I won't talk about it too much. But while we're here and we had the car on the jack, I noticed that our rear right-hand side wheel hub bearing is gone, is completely finished. So I'm going to replace it here in the car park of Goldfields Off-Road. So cheers, guys. They're going to let me utilize the car park. I'm going to do it all with my own tools. I have everything required, I think. It's the first time I've had to change a wheel bearing on this Land Rover Defender, which I think isn't too bad, seeing as though we've done 70,000 kilometers and we carry a pretty heavy load. All right, so I've got just my basic toolkit out here that I think I'll need for the job. Probably maybe need a few more bits and pieces. The most important thing, which I've been carrying, I'm actually quite excited about this job, to be honest. I've been carrying this thing, this 52mm socket around with me for 4.5 years now, often wondering if I'll ever have to use it. I thought it might be one of those things, if I carry it with me, I'll never have to use it. But here we go, the day has finally come. So we're always going to loosen these wheel nuts while the vehicle is still on the ground, for obvious reasons. I should chock the tires, I'll do that in a minute, that's why it's rolling back a fraction. Now, because I am here at a garage at Goldfields Off-Road, I've got access to this massive trolley jack behind me, which is pretty awesome. Obviously don't carry one of those on the road, I just use my bottle jack if we're out in the bush. And I'm gonna use a jack stand for safety because it's here. I don't have one of these when I travel, for obvious reasons. It's big and it's heavy and we just haven't got the space to store one. Out in the bush, probably if I could find a log or a couple of rocks or something, or even some bricks, it is a good idea to back up your bottle jack or your high lift, whatever you're using, just in case. So cheers, guys. Quick and easy way to check your wheel bearings on the front or the rear if you think they might be on the way out is to grab the top of the tire, and jiggle it back and forth like that. If there's any movement whatsoever, then chances are you need to replace a wheel bearing. This one, I'll get a close up in a minute, has some pretty drastic movement, and I'll tell you how also I started to realize something was up. I noticed a little while ago, not long ago, only maybe last week, in my braking. When I was putting my foot on the brake, I could feel a vibration. And that's obviously as it's grabbing the brake disc, the tire is vibrating, the brake disc is vibrating with a loose bearing. This one, I'm not sure if you can see that movement, but it's pretty good. There's probably like a good, I would say 3 to 4 millimeters of play there. So yeah, she's gone. When we check it, we grab it on the top and the bottom and jiggle it like that. Because on the back you could jiggle it either way, but on the front, obviously if you grab it at the sides, when you've got it jacked up off the ground and wiggle it to and fro, you're not going to tell if it's got any play in that bearing because it's going to possibly move on your swivel hubs themselves. A little bit of mucking around there, but I've managed to get the jack stand underneath. I've lowered it onto the jack stand, so the jack stand is now taking the weight, but I leave the trolley jack. After the trolley jack came off, I just gave it a little half pump. And I do keep it, the trolley jack, just supporting it a little bit. Probably not necessary. Primarily the weight is on the jack stand. Look after your wheel nuts. Don't let any sand or grit get into them. If you do, clean them afterwards. You can see why it's affecting the braking by that movement there. It's a huge amount of movement. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do is pull off the half shaft flange itself, and I'll remove the half shaft. So I used my 17mm socket and my very, very beautiful, you guys remember this one? Gift from Mr. Gak in Japan. Thank you, Gak. And not only is that a gift from Gak, but these bolts. And Gak, if you're watching the videos, you'll be very happy to know not one little speck of corrosion on these highly treated bolts that came from Gak in Hokkaido. So Arigato gak. All right, next step of the operation, I will have to remove the brake caliper. I'll hang that off, and then I'll be able to, then I'll finish removing the half shaft and carry on with the operation. But I'm gonna get that caliper out of the way next. 13mm to remove those couple there. Be very careful when you're doing something like this. You are dealing with your brake line. Try not to kink them or damage them as you do this job. All right, the brake caliper removed, and I've got that hanging off to the upper housing there with some heavy duty cable ties just to support that. Pull it off to the side. Now I'll continue it down here, pull this flange and the half shaft out of there. All right, I put all my bolts down to the side. I've got a rag laid out on the cardboard just to protect them all, looking after the threads. Very, very important side actually. And this will have a gasket behind there. Now when we do this job, I'm not sure if I've got a spare one. I think I do, but this gasket, this flange gasket here, should be replaced every time you remove this. So that's the half shaft coming out. I've done this job quite a few times actually, not a wheel bearing, but remove the half shafts. You guys may remember many years ago, the clicking noise saga. Problem with spacers, don't use spacers. Not for us anyway, not suited for our heavy load. And now, we get this half shaft out of there. As you can see already, I put cardboard down as well because usually when you pull this out, you will get some drips. Bit of crap on the floor, which I'm getting, so I don't want to put this greasy muck all over the decking here. Another opportunity here is to inspect your half shafts for any wear or damage. Now these are cam heavy duty half shafts that we've got in here. Alrighty, it's looking okay to me at a quick first glance. I do have a little bit of play in the flange itself, but that's okay. All right, so in here we've got our wheel hub nut, which is why I carry the 52mm big socket, 1/2-inch drive socket. I'm gonna try and clean that up a little bit in there. We do have a anti-rotation tab, which is knocked over on the side there. I'll have to bash that out a little bit. I can just sort of, this screwdriver is possibly not the right tool for the job. It's definitely not the right tool for the job, but anyway, I'm just able to get in there to lever this anti-rotation tab out of there, and it's moving. All right, I think now I do have that anti-rotation tab opened up enough to try and break this hub nut. Now that was a lot easier than what I thought it was going to be because it came off hand tight. Very, very scary, but I think that's just from the movement in the bearing. Very careful with this. Obviously this is your, oh, there's the bearing. There we go. Well, that was easy. On top of the bearing you do have a like a spacer or a washer, whatever you want to call it. That's one of the bearings. Straight to the bin for that one. I'll put that over to the side there. This nut, the 52mm nut that I used before, some people probably reuse them. I do have a couple of spares, so I'll put a new one on there. I think you are supposed to put a new one along with replacing the gasket when you do this job. There we go. As easy as that. Good time to inspect everything that comes out of here, including the stub axle here. I like to clean it all up, have a good look at it. Another good little trick when you're doing a job like this, use your phone, take photos of everything as you pull it apart the way it is. I've got a rubber seal there. You might think it's simple, pull a rubber seal out. It's easy to pull it out, but then try to remember which way it went back in again. Could be the difference between having an oil leak or not. I can really feel, I can even see the play in the bearings there. Quite a bit of movement. No need to muck around with them. Straight to the scrap heap. And here we have a rubber seal, rubber oil seal. I think I've got some spares of these. I mean, if you've got the spares and you can order some new ones, it doesn't hurt to put the spares on, I think. And while I've got access to this stub axle, I don't need to do anything to it. It looks in good condition, but it's not always you do have a good visual of it like this. So I will just check the tightness of all these bolts here. Just give them a little one just to make sure they're not visibly loose. Doesn't need to be much. Now I have often said in our videos that we do carry minimal spare parts, and I still stand by that statement. For an international overland journey, we do carry a minimal amount of spare parts, and it's mostly consumables. I classify the wheel bearings, although this is the very first wheel bearing that we've done, like I mentioned before, in 70,000 kilometers. I've carried them all this way along with that big 52mm socket for just this occasion, and I use the Timken. Now I was told very early on, and I think it's a well-known fact, that these are apparently the best bearings for a Land Rover Defender anyway, and possibly, I don't know if they make for other vehicles. I assume they do. Alright, so I've installed both of the, I'm not actually sure what they're called, but the housings. So no grease on those ones. They're the bearing housings, the chamfered bearing housing, in from both sides. Make sure you put them in the right way. And I check my spare parts, and I do have the rubber oil seal as well, or grease seal, whatever you want to call it. So I'll use my spare part. So all the parts that I use here today, I'll reorder straight away, get them on their way. Very clever, but it actually says on it, this way to stub axle. That's your stub axle that you can see there, so it even tells you which direction that the seal needs to be facing. Pretty cool. So Joha's given me a pretty cool little gadget. The wheel bearing I have installed in this little plastic thingy, bearing greaser I guess we can call it. I screw the top down, the bearing's trapped inside there, squeezes all the air out. It's got a grease nipple on the top. I'll connect the grease nipple and I just pump in there, and it squeezes the grease through the bearing to save you doing it with your fingers, which I think is a pretty nifty idea. So let's see how that goes. Now another thing, just whenever you're greasing anything, especially something like the wheel bearings, I'll actually even give the grease gun a couple of pumps just to watch the clean grease come through. And yeah, I see a chunk of dirt and sand come out in that first pump, so just clean the end of the nozzle. Okay, fantastic. So now I know how this thing works. It's actually got a little weep hole. So it's got a bleed hole in the top here. The grease now is coming out through this little pinhole. So I assume now that that means the bearing is packed full. I'll unscrew and have a look. That's very nifty indeed. I've pushed that bearing into there. I'm now going to put the seal in. Have a look to make sure I put it the right way. This way to stub axle, can't mess that up. Well, you never know. As I'm doing this, I'm looking around on the ground to be sure I haven't left anything. No parts, no major parts left on the ground. Only the parts that I'm replacing. Straight away I'm noticing it's not shaking anymore, so that confirms that it was a busted bearing. As soon as I'm at the garage, I'm doing this job professionally. I've even got a torque wrench. I'm actually thinking about purchasing one of these. I've been a long time without one. Probably should have one already. Now, according to the manual, and I've double checked, triple checked online with a couple of different Land Rover Defender forums, the Puma 2.4 model wheel hub is done up to 210 Newton meters. So that's what I'm going to do that up to now. anti-rotation tab, which I'm going to bash in here. Now, I have been using a bit of grease around this thing. I've kept it pretty clean, but good idea before you put your caliper back on, just give this brake disc here a bit of a wipe down. You can use some electric clean if you wanted to. That's the calipers installed and the nuts torqued. I did put a tiny bit of medium strength Loctite on those bolts. Not sure if it's recommended or not, but I did it anyway. Tiny medium strength, so it'll come off easy enough. The bolts that I pulled out had Loctite on them. They were hard to get out all the way, and I could see the blue Loctite, so I'll put the same blue Loctite back on there, which is medium. My first wheel bearing, it took me about probably 2.5 hours, I would say. Maybe 3, actually. Which I'm alright with. I had the time and I preferred to take my time and do it properly. But to be honest, I'd watched so many YouTube videos of Land Rover Defender wheel bearing change outs that I actually felt like I'd done the job before, as strange as that may sound. But yeah, I recommend that. That's how I do learn a lot of stuff on my Land Rover. How I learn to do the maintenance is watching YouTube. I mean, everything's there. I do come from a mechanical background. I mean, I'm a plumber, I've worked offshore, I've been a mechanical pipe fitter. So, you know, using the tools and manual labor comes naturally to me, but I'm not a mechanic. So, you know, it's still a learning curve. So get on YouTube, but if in doubt, go to a professional, as I will still do for the big jobs. When we put these back on, it's still up on the jack at the moment, so I still tighten them opposites, then I'll give them just a little nip. I'm going to lower it to the ground. I'll pick it up first, remove the jack stand, lower it to the ground, and then use the torque wrench, because I've got one here, to do those wheel nuts up to the correct torque. I'm going to torque these up to 130 Newton meters, and that is because I have alloy rims, alloy wheels, so that's the reason for that little bit higher torque. Apparently you do the steel wheels to a little bit less. Torque these up, that's done deal. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that little video and maybe learned a little bit. I know I learned a hell of a lot. An essential job for any off-roader, any overlander, changing a wheel bearing. Look it up, get on YouTube, check out your particular vehicle. I'm sure it's something similar. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.